To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. Vincent Hartley had always prided himself on reading people. It's what made him successful in his previous life, before he chose to disappear into suburban anonymity. At 42, he appeared to be nothing more than a mid-level operations manager at Pinnacle Logistics, a company owned by his brother-in-law, Roger DeWitt. To his neighbors in Cedar Falls, he was just another face in the crowd, a quiet man who kept his lawn pristine and his past buried. His wife, Crystal, had been the prize he thought he'd won. Blonde, ambitious, and sharp-tongued, she'd captivated him 8 years ago when they met at a charity gala. She claimed to love his mysterious nature, though Vincent suspected she was more attracted to the generous lifestyle he provided. Roger, her younger brother, had offered Vincent the job shortly after their wedding, a gesture Vincent now realized was calculated from the beginning. Their Tudor-style home in Maple Ridge was Crystal's domain. She decorated it with expensive furniture and hosted dinner parties that impressed their social circle. Vincent played his role perfectly, the devoted husband who worked hard to provide for his beautiful wife. But lately, he'd noticed the subtle changes. Crystal's late nights at the gym, the way she guarded her phone, the knowing looks exchanged between her and Roger during family gatherings. Vincent's instincts, honed by years in a much darker world, began to stir. He started paying attention to the small details: credit card statements, phone records, the mileage on Crystal's BMW. What he discovered was a web of deceit that went deeper than simple infidelity. Crystal wasn't just cheating on him. She was systematically dismantling his life with surgical precision, aided by her brother and her lover, a man Vincent had never suspected, but whose identity would soon shake him to his core. The revelation came on a Tuesday evening in October. Vincent had installed a small recording device in Crystal's car after noticing she'd been meeting someone at the Riverside Hotel. The conversation he captured was a masterclass in betrayal. "The divorce papers are ready." Crystal's voice was crisp through the static. "Roger will fire him tomorrow, and by Friday, Vincent will be served. My lawyer says we can take him for everything. The house, his savings, even his pension." The male voice that responded was smooth, confident. "And you're sure he doesn't suspect anything? He's always seemed observant." Crystal laughed, a sound that chilled Vincent's blood. "Vincent, please. He's a middle-aged nobody who thinks he's living the American dream. He has no idea what's coming." Vincent sat in his study, the recording playing on repeat as he stared at the wall. They had no idea who they were really dealing with. Crystal and Roger saw him as a sheep to be slaughtered, but they were about to learn that some wolves are very good at wearing sheep's clothing. Chapter 2. The Betrayal. The annual review at Pinnacle Logistics was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. Vincent arrived at Roger's corner office wearing his usual pressed khakis and button-down shirt, the picture of corporate mediocrity. Roger sat behind his mahogany desk, barely looking up from his computer as Vincent entered. "Close the door, Vincent," Roger said, his tone already different from their usual interactions. Gone was the false warmth of family gatherings, replaced by cold professionalism. Vincent complied, then took the chair across from Roger's desk. He'd been preparing for this moment, but playing the part of the unsuspecting victim required careful calibration. "How's Crystal?" Roger asked, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "She's well. Looking forward to our anniversary next month," Vincent replied, studying Roger's reaction. Roger's smirk widened. "About that, Vincent, I'll cut to the chase. We're terminating your employment. Budget cuts." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Vincent let his face register shock, confusion, then hurt. "Budget cuts? But Roger, the company's doing better than ever. The quarterly reports. The decision's been made." Roger leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying himself. "We'll give you 2 weeks severance and a decent reference. Consider it a family favor." Vincent's hands trembled slightly, a calculated display of emotion. "Roger, I don't understand. 8 years I've worked here. 8 years of loyalty to you and this company." "Loyalty?" Roger laughed. "Vincent, you're a middling employee at best. We need people with vision, with drive, not someone content to coast through life." The insult was deliberate, designed to break Vincent's spirit before the real blow landed. Vincent played his part perfectly, shoulders sagging as he processed his termination. I need to call Crystal, Vincent said, reaching for his phone. Actually, Roger said, sliding a business card across the desk, you might want to call a lawyer instead. Crystal's attorney, actually. Seems she has some papers for you. Vincent stared at the card, then at Roger. What are you talking about? Divorce papers, Vincent. She's leaving you. Has been planning it for months. Roger's cruelty was almost artistic in its precision. She figured it would be easier to handle both pieces of bad news at once. Clean break and all that. The room spun around Vincent as he processed this orchestrated demolition of his life. He'd known it was coming, but the casual brutality of it still struck him. These people had planned his destruction like a military operation. Why? Vincent whispered, his voice barely audible. Roger shrugged. Why not? You never really fit in, Vincent. Crystal deserves better than a nobody who peaked in middle management. She deserves someone with real ambition. Vincent stood slowly, his legs unsteady. 8 years, he repeated. 8 years of Crystal pretending to love you. Roger said with vicious satisfaction. 8 years of you thinking you belonged in our world. Face it, Vincent, you were always just a placeholder. Vincent walked to the door on unsteady legs, then paused. You're right about one thing, Roger. I never really fit in. He turned back, and for just a moment, Roger saw something flicker in Vincent's eyes, something cold and dangerous. But then again, neither do you. The moment passed, and Vincent was gone, leaving Roger with an inexplicable chill running down his spine. Chapter 3, The Preparation. Vincent's hands shook as he inserted the key into his front door, but not from grief or shock. The tremor came from rage, a cold, calculating fury that he'd kept buried for 8 years. As he stepped into the house that had been his sanctuary, he found Crystal in the master bedroom, methodically packing his belongings into suitcases. She looked up as he entered, her face a mask of cold determination. Good, you're home. We need to talk. Do we? Vincent's voice was steady now, the performance over. Crystal straightened, smoothing her blonde hair. Vincent, this isn't personal. We've grown apart. I need someone who can match my ambitions, someone who understands what I want from life. And what you want is someone who isn't me. Exactly. She handed him a manila envelope. The divorce papers. My lawyer recommends you get your own attorney, but honestly, this is pretty straightforward. I'm keeping the house, and my lawyer says I'm entitled to half of everything else. Vincent opened the envelope, scanning the documents. The demands were breathtaking in their audacity, not just half of his assets, but spousal support, the house, even his retirement accounts. This is everything, Crystal. This would leave me with nothing. You'll figure it out. You always do. She gestured to the suitcases. I've packed your things. There's a motel on Route 9 that rents by the week. It'll give you time to find something more suitable. The word suitable hung in the air like a slap. Vincent set the papers on the dresser and looked at his wife, really looked at her. The woman he'd loved, provided for, protected. The woman who was discarding him like yesterday's newspaper. There's someone else, he said. It wasn't a question. Crystal's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing a flash of guilt. That's not relevant to our situation, isn't it? 8 years of marriage, and you're throwing it away for someone else. I think that's pretty relevant. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Vincent. Crystal's voice took on a warning tone. Sign the papers, take your things, and let's end this civilly. Vincent picked up one of the suitcases, testing its weight. You know what's funny, Crystal? You and Roger think you know me. You think I'm some pathetic middle-aged loser who'll just roll over and accept this. Aren't you? The cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. Vincent smiled then, an expression that didn't reach his eyes. We'll see. As he loaded his belongings into his car, Vincent's mind was already working. Crystal and Roger had made their first mistake. They'd underestimated him. Their second mistake was assuming he'd built his comfortable life through legitimate means. The truth was far more complex and far more dangerous. Vincent Hartley hadn't always been Vincent Hartley. Before Cedar Falls, before Pinnacle Logistics, before Crystal, he'd been someone else entirely. Someone who understood that in certain circles, betrayal was a capital offense. As he drove away from the house that had been his prison, Vincent reached for his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in nearly a decade. Marcus, it's Vincent, he said when the call connected. I need to ask a favor. A big one. The voice on the other end was gravelly, amused. Well, the ghost returns. What do you need, old friend? Information, resources, and maybe some of the old crew, if any of them are still around. That kind of favor comes with a price, Vincent. You know that. Vincent's smile was cold as winter. Don't worry about the price, Marcus. I'm about to come into some money. Chapter 4, The Identity. The cheap motel room on Route 9 served its purpose perfectly. It was exactly what Crystal and Roger expected of Vincent's reduced circumstances. While they believed he was wallowing in self-pity, Vincent was actually orchestrating the most complex operation of his career. The man who answered Vincent's call, Marcus Torino, arrived at the motel on a rainy Thursday evening. He was older now, grayer, but his eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had made him one of the most feared information brokers on the East Coast. Vincent had worked with him extensively in his previous life, before he decided to disappear into suburban anonymity. You look soft, Vincent, Marcus said, settling into the room's single chair. Domestic life treating you well? It was, until recently. Vincent poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a bottle he'd bought specifically for this meeting. Tell me what you found. Marcus pulled out a tablet and swiped through several screens. Your wife's lover is an interesting choice. Trevor Kellerman, 38, works in commercial real estate. Divorced 2 years ago, pays alimony to his ex-wife and child support for twin daughters. He's been seeing Crystal for about 6 months. How did they meet? Kellerman was representing a client interested in some property your brother-in-law was selling. They met at a business lunch. Crystal was their playing hostess. According to my sources, the affair started that same week. Vincent absorbed this information, his expression unchanged. What else? Kellerman's got financial problems. The divorce cleaned him out, and his real estate deals haven't been as lucrative as he'd hoped. He's behind on his alimony payments, and his business partner is threatening to dissolve their firm. So he's desperate. Very. Which makes him perfect for your wife's plan. She gets a lover who's completely dependent on her, and he gets access to your assets through the divorce settlement. Vincent nodded. The pieces were falling into place. What about Roger? Marcus's expression darkened. That's where it gets interesting. Your brother-in-law has been embezzling from his own company for the past 2 years. Small amounts at first, but it's escalated. He's moved nearly $300,000 into offshore accounts. He's stealing from himself? Not exactly. Pinnacle Logistics has several silent partners, investors who wanted a piece of the transportation industry without the headache of day-to-day operations. Roger's been skimming from their dividends and covering it up with creative accounting. Vincent smiled coldly. How long before they notice? My guess? The next quarterly audit, which is scheduled for next month. Unless someone tips them off sooner. And Crystal? She knows about the embezzlement. Has to. She's been helping him move the money. They're planning to pin it on you if anyone starts asking questions. Your access to the financial systems, your recent performance issues, your bitter divorce. It all adds up to a perfect scapegoat. Vincent set down his glass, his mind already working through the implications. They're not just destroying my life. They're framing me for their crimes. It's actually brilliant, in a twisted way. You disappear into poverty and disgrace. They disappear with the money. Clean slate for everyone except you. Everyone except me, Vincent repeated softly. Marcus, I need you to dig deeper. I want to know everything about Trevor Kellerman, his finances, his habits, his weaknesses. I want to know about Roger's silent partners, their backgrounds, their temperaments. And I want to know about Crystal's plans for the money. Marcus gathered his materials. This is going to cost you, Vincent. A lot. I told you not to worry about the money. Vincent's smile was predatory. In fact, I'm about to solve both our problems. Chapter 5, The Trap. 3 days later, Vincent sat in his rental car outside the Riverside Hotel, watching Trevor Kellerman's silver Mercedes pull into the parking lot. Through his binoculars, he could see Crystal waiting in the lobby, dressed in a red dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Vincent had spent the past 72 hours learning everything about Trevor Kellerman's life. The man was predictable, same gym routine, same lunch spots, same afternoon meetings with potential clients. More importantly, he was desperate. His ex-wife was threatening to take him back to court for missed alimony payments, and his business partner was pressuring him to bring in more clients or dissolve their partnership. That desperation was about to become Vincent's greatest weapon. Vincent made a phone call. Mrs. Kellerman? This is Vincent Hartley. I believe your ex-husband has been telling you some stories about his improved financial situation. The woman's voice was sharp, bitter. Who is this? Someone who has information about Trevor's creative accounting practices. I think you and I should meet. An hour later, Vincent was sitting across from Diana Kellerman in a downtown coffee shop. She was an attractive woman in her early 30s, with tired eyes and the brittle composure of someone who'd been disappointed too many times. Trevor stopped paying alimony 3 months ago, she said, stirring her coffee with agitated motions. Says his business is struggling, but he just bought a new car and took his girlfriend to Paris. His girlfriend is my wife, Vincent said quietly. Diana looked up sharply. Your wife. Soon-to-be ex-wife. They're planning to divorce me and take half of everything I own. Your ex-husband seems to think it's going to solve all his financial problems. That bastard. Diana's voice was venomous. He leaves me to raise our daughters alone, claims he can't afford child support, and then runs off with a married woman? Vincent slid a manila folder across the table. These are copies of Trevor's financial records. Bank statements, credit card receipts, travel expenses. I think you'll find them very interesting. Diana opened the folder, her eyes widening as she scanned the documents. He told the court he was barely making ends meet. This shows he spent $4,000 on jewelry last month alone. Jewelry for my wife, I assume. Vincent's voice was matter of fact. Diana, I'm going to destroy Trevor Kellerman. I'm going to take everything he has and leave him with nothing. But I need your help. What do you want me to do? File for contempt of court. Show these records to your lawyer. Make Trevor's life hell through the legal system while I work on him from another angle. Diana closed the folder, her decision made. What else? Vincent smiled. There's more. Trevor's business partner, Gary Morrison, doesn't know about the affair. He thinks Trevor's been distracted by personal problems, but he doesn't know the specifics. I think Gary deserves to know the truth about his partner's priorities. You want me to tell him? I want you to show him these financial records. Let him draw his own conclusions about Trevor's commitment to their business. Diana's smile was sharp as a blade. Consider it done. As Vincent drove back to his motel, he felt the familiar satisfaction of a plan falling into place. Crystal and Trevor thought they were playing chess, but Vincent was playing a much more complex game. They were about to learn that he hadn't spent 8 years in suburban obscurity because he was weak or simple. He'd been hiding because he was dangerous. The next morning, Vincent received a text from Diana. Gary wants to meet with you. He's very interested in your information about Trevor's business practices. Vincent smiled. The trap was set, and the prey was walking right into it. Chapter 6, The Revelation. Gary Morrison was a man betrayed. Vincent could see it in his eyes as they sat in the back booth of a dimly lit restaurant downtown, the kind of place where business deals were made and secrets were traded. 20 years, Gary said, his voice thick with emotion. 20 years I've been partners with Trevor, built this business from nothing, and he's been lying to me for months. Vincent sipped his coffee, studying the older man. Gary was in his 50s, successful but not wealthy, the kind of person who'd worked hard for everything he had. Learning that his partner had been funneling money into an affair while claiming the business was struggling had shattered his trust completely. The travel expenses alone, Gary continued, rifling through the documents Vincent had provided. $10,000 in the past 3 months. Paris, New York, weekend trips to ski resorts. And I'm working 16-hour days trying to keep us afloat. It gets worse, Vincent said quietly. Trevor's been using company resources to impress my wife. The Mercedes he's driving? Leased through your business. The expensive dinners, the jewelry, even the hotel rooms. It's all coming out of your partnership. Gary's face reddened. That son of a bitch. I trusted him. There's something else you should know. Vincent leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Trevor and my wife aren't just having an affair. They're planning to take me for everything in the divorce, and Trevor's counting on that money to save his financial situation. He's been promising Crystal that he'll be able to support her lifestyle once my assets are liquidated. He's using your divorce to solve his business problems? Exactly. And if that plan fails, what do you think happens to your partnership? Trevor's already financially desperate. How long before he starts looking at your business assets as his personal piggy bank? Gary set down the documents, his hands shaking slightly. What do you want from me, Vincent? I want you to dissolve the partnership. Force Trevor to buy out your share of the business. or sell your half to someone else. Either way, cut him off from the resources he's been using to finance his affair. That would destroy him financially. Yes, it would. Vincent's smile was cold. But that's just the beginning. Gary studied Vincent carefully. You're not just some cuckolded husband looking for revenge, are you? There's something else going on here. Vincent nodded slowly. There is. And if you help me, I'll make sure you're compensated for your trouble. More than compensated. What kind of compensation are we talking about? Vincent slid a business card across the table. Call this number. Ask for Marcus Torino. Tell him Vincent sent you, and that you're interested in investing in some upcoming real estate opportunities. Gary looked at the card suspiciously. What kind of opportunities? The kind that become available when certain people lose everything they own. Vincent stood up, leaving a $50 bill on the table. Gary, in about 2 weeks, Trevor Kellerman is going to be completely destroyed. Professionally, financially, personally. When that happens, there are going to be some very attractive properties and business opportunities up for grabs. You can either be part of that, or you can go down with him. As Vincent walked away, he could feel Gary's eyes following him. The man was smart enough to recognize an opportunity when he saw one, and desperate enough to take it. Vincent's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. The silent partners want to meet. They're very interested in your information about Roger's creative accounting. Vincent smiled. The dominoes were starting to fall, and Crystal and her conspirators had no idea what was coming. Chapter 7. The Confrontation. The meeting took place in a private dining room at the Continental Club, the kind of establishment where Cedar Falls elite conducted their most delicate business. Vincent arrived 15 minutes early, studying the 3 men who would soon hold Roger DeWitt's fate in their hands. William Prescott was old money, third-generation wealth built on manufacturing and real estate. His family had been investing in transportation companies for decades, viewing them as steady, reliable income sources. Harold Vance was newer money, a tech entrepreneur who diversified into traditional industries. The third man, Anthony Delacroix, was the most dangerous, a businessman with connections that extended into very gray areas of commerce. Vincent had done his homework on all 3. They were not men who tolerated theft from their investments. Mr. Hartley, Prescott said as Vincent took his seat. Marcus tells us you have some concerning information about our investment in Pinnacle Logistics. I do. Vincent placed a thick folder on the table. Roger DeWitt has been systematically embezzling from your dividends for the past 2 years. The total amount is approximately $320,000. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Vance leaned forward, his expression deadly serious. That's a very serious accusation. It's also completely documented. Vincent opened the folder, revealing bank statements, transfer records, and coded accounting entries. Roger created a complex system of false invoices and inflated expenses to cover the theft. He's been moving the money through offshore accounts, preparing to disappear with it. Delacroix spoke for the first time, his voice soft but menacing. How did you come by this information? Roger is my brother-in-law. Was my brother-in-law. I worked for him until recently, and I had access to the financial systems. When I discovered what he was doing, I started documenting everything. Why bring this to us? Prescott asked. Why not go to the authorities? Vincent smiled coldly. Because the authorities would take months to investigate, during which time Roger could disappear with your money. I thought you might prefer a more immediate resolution. The 3 men exchanged glances. Vincent could see the calculation in their eyes, the cost of legal action versus the cost of other solutions. What do you propose? Delacroix asked. Roger has been planning to frame me for his embezzlement. He fired me, my wife is divorcing me, and they've positioned me as the perfect scapegoat. I propose we turn the tables on him. How? Vincent pulled out another set of documents. Roger has been working with his sister, my wife, to hide the stolen money. They plan to use my divorce settlement to legitimize some of the funds, then disappear together. But there's a problem with their plan, which is, they don't know who I really am. Vincent's smile was predatory. Gentlemen, before I became Vincent Hartley, suburban nobody, I was someone else entirely. Someone with skills that would be very useful in recovering your money. Vance leaned back in his chair. What kind of skills? The kind that convinced Marcus Torino to provide me with detailed financial records of your investment. The kind that allowed me to trace Roger's money through 3 different offshore banks. The kind that could make Roger DeWitt and his sister very eager to return what they've stolen. Delacroix smiled, and Vincent recognized a kindred spirit. What do you want in return? I want Roger and Crystal to lose everything. I want them to understand what it feels like to be betrayed by someone they trust. And I want your permission to use whatever methods are necessary to accomplish that. Prescott looked uncomfortable. Mr. Hartley, we're businessmen, not criminals. Of course not, Vincent agreed. But sometimes business requires creative solutions. Marcus can provide details of my previous work if you'd like references. The meeting continued for another hour, during which Vincent laid out his plan in careful detail. When he left the Continental Club, he had something he hadn't possessed in 8 years, the backing of men with unlimited resources and flexible morals. Chapter 8. The Destruction. Crystal's phone had been ringing nonstop for 3 days. 67 calls from lawyers, investigators, and people whose names she didn't recognize, but whose voices carried unmistakable menace. She sat in her living room, surrounded by legal documents and empty wine glasses, trying to understand how her perfect plan had fallen apart so completely. It had started with Trevor. His business partner had abruptly dissolved their partnership, forcing Trevor to buy out Gary's share of the company or face liquidation. With no available capital, Trevor had been forced to sell his assets, including the Mercedes and the expensive watch Crystal had admired. His ex-wife had also filed contempt charges, demanding immediate payment of back alimony plus penalties. Then Roger's world had collapsed. The silent partners had confronted him with evidence of embezzlement that was so comprehensive, so meticulously documented, that denial was impossible. They'd given him 24 hours to return their money or face consequences that went far beyond legal action. But the worst part was Vincent. Her pathetic, middle-aged husband had vanished from his motel room, leaving behind only a note that read, "Some wolves are very good at wearing sheep's clothing." Crystal's hands shook as she poured another glass of wine. The divorce papers lay unsigned on her coffee table, and she was beginning to understand that they might never be signed. Her lawyer had stopped returning her calls after receiving some kind of information package that had made him recommend she find new representation immediately. The doorbell rang, and Crystal jumped. She'd been expecting this moment for days, but she still wasn't prepared when she opened the door to find Vincent standing on her porch. He looked different. Gone was the rumpled, defeated man who'd left with his suitcases. This Vincent was dressed in an expensive suit, his hair perfectly styled, his eyes cold and calculating. Most unsettling of all, he was smiling. "Hello, Crystal. We need to talk." She stepped back, letting him enter. "Vincent, I don't know what you think you're doing, but I'm collecting what's mine." Vincent walked into the living room, examining the expensive furnishings with new eyes. "This house, for instance. Did you know it's actually titled in my name? You wanted to put it in both our names when we bought it, but I insisted on keeping it in my name for tax purposes. Remember?" Crystal's blood ran cold. "The divorce settlement won't be happening." Vincent sat down in his favorite chair, completely at ease. "You see, Crystal, you can't divorce someone who doesn't exist. And Vincent Hartley, middle-aged nobody, is about to disappear forever." "What are you talking about?" Vincent's smile widened. "My real name is Vincent Marconi. I'm the son of Anthony Marconi, who ran one of the most successful import businesses on the East Coast until his death in 1998. I inherited his business, his connections, and his rather flexible approach to problem solving." Crystal sank onto the couch, her legs suddenly weak. "You're lying." "Am I? Tell me, Crystal, how do you think I acquired the resources to maintain this lifestyle on a manager's salary? How do you think I could afford this house, your car, your jewelry, your shopping trips? You said you had investments." "I do. Very lucrative ones. The kind that require special licenses and insurance policies." Vincent leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "The kind that sometimes require making people disappear." Crystal's wine glass slipped from her numb fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. "You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to educate you. You see, Crystal, you and Roger made a fundamental error. You assumed I was weak because I chose to live quietly. You mistook restraint for inability." Vincent stood up, straightening his jacket. "But some situations require a more direct approach." The front door opened, and Roger stumbled in, his face pale and his clothes disheveled. "Crystal, we need to leave. Now." The partners, They're not just investors. There, he stopped when he saw Vincent, his face going white. Hello, Roger. I was just explaining to Crystal how you've both made some very poor choices. Roger's voice was barely a whisper. Who are you? I'm the man whose life you tried to destroy. I'm also the man who's going to ensure you understand the consequences of betrayal. Vincent looked at his watch. You have 30 minutes to pack one bag each. Then you're going to walk away from this house, this life, and each other. Forever. You can't make us, Crystal started. Can't I? Vincent's smile was arctic. Crystal, your brother embezzled more than $300,000 from some very dangerous people. They want their money back, and they want someone to pay for the inconvenience. I've convinced them that you and Roger are the responsible parties. But you know we don't have that kind of money. I know. That's what makes this so tragic. Vincent walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood he'd called home for 8 years. The partners have agreed to accept alternative forms of compensation. Roger's business, this house, your jewelry, your car, it should cover most of what you owe. Roger found his voice. And if we refuse? Vincent turned back to them, and for the first time, they saw the predator that had been hiding behind the suburban mask. Then you'll discover why my father's business was so successful and why his enemies had a tendency to disappear permanently. Chapter 9, The Resolution. 6 months later, Vincent sat in the study of his restored home, reading a newspaper article about the mysterious disappearance of Roger and Crystal DeWitt. The reporter speculated about gambling debts, failed business ventures, and possible foul play, but the truth was much simpler. They had run, just as Vincent had known they would. Roger had liquidated what assets he could, repaid a portion of the embezzled funds, and vanished in the night with his sister. Vincent's contacts had tracked them to a small town in Mexico, where they were living in poverty and obscurity, fitting punishment for people who had valued wealth above all else. Trevor Kellerman had fared worse. Stripped of his business, his assets, and his dignity, he'd been forced to declare bankruptcy and move back in with his elderly parents. His ex-wife had been relentless in pursuing the back alimony, and Gary Morrison had ensured that word of Trevor's unprofessional conduct spread throughout the real estate community. He would never work in the industry again. Vincent's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. New job opportunity. Interested? Vincent smiled, but shook his head. He'd had enough of the old life. Vincent Marconi was dead and buried, and Vincent Hartley had work to do. The doorbell rang, and Vincent opened it to find a young woman on his porch. She was in her early 20s, with Crystal's blonde hair but kind eyes that reminded him of someone else entirely. Mr. Hartley? I'm Jennifer Kellerman, Trevor's daughter. Vincent studied her carefully. What can I do for you, Jennifer? I wanted to thank you. Her voice was soft but steady. What you did to my father, he deserved it. He abandoned my sister and me when our parents divorced, and he left my mother struggling to pay the bills while he ran around with your wife. Vincent's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Don't be. My mother told me how you helped her get the back alimony, and how you made sure the court knew about Dad's hidden assets. We finally have enough money for me to finish college. That's good to hear. Jennifer hesitated, then spoke again. There's something else. The lawyers handling your wife's situation, they had some questions about assets and inheritance. They said you might need someone to help organize financial records. Vincent studied the young woman more carefully. She had intelligence in her eyes, and something else, a hunger for justice that he recognized. Are you looking for a job, Jennifer? I'm looking for a chance to learn from someone who knows how to make things right. Her smile was sharp. Someone who knows how to make sure people get what they deserve. Vincent smiled back, recognizing a kindred spirit. Come in. Let's talk. As he closed the door behind her, Vincent reflected on the lessons of the past year. Crystal and Roger had taught him that even the most carefully constructed life could be destroyed by betrayal. But they had also taught him something else, that sometimes the only way to achieve justice was to embrace the darkness that civilized society preferred to ignore. He had spent 8 years trying to be someone else, someone softer and more forgiving. But some betrayals demanded a response that went beyond forgiveness. Some people needed to learn that actions had consequences, and that some wolves never forgot the taste of blood. Vincent Hartley had returned to Cedar Falls, but he was no longer the man who had left. He was something more dangerous, a predator who had learned patience, a hunter who understood the value of appearing harmless until the moment came to strike. The neighborhood children still played in his yard, and his neighbors still waved when they saw him working in his garden. But now Vincent knew the truth about himself and about the world he lived in. Some sheep were really wolves, and some wolves were very, very good at waiting for the right moment to reveal their true nature. In the end, Crystal and Roger had been right about one thing. Vincent had never really fit into their world of casual cruelty and calculated betrayal. He belonged to a much darker world, one where justice was swift and final, and where some debts could only be paid in blood and fear. But that was a lesson for another day, and other enemies who had yet to reveal themselves. For now, Vincent was content to tend his garden and plan for the future, secure in the knowledge that he had balanced the scales of justice in his own favor. Some wolves, after all, were very good at wearing sheep's clothing, and some sheep were smart enough to never trust a wolf again. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.